What is up, boxing besties? Welcome back to Xicana Boxing on YouTube. And if this is your first time, hi. My name is Lily. I am an independent boxing journalist who sometimes gets on here and yaps about whatever's going on in boxing. And this weekend we have honestly, one of the best fights to be made this year, and it just started. So Benavidez versus Morrell at 175, and I get to cover it. Yes, so I got credentials to this fight, and I'm super excited to start off the year covering such a big fight. And I wanted to get on here and just invite you guys to subscribe to not only YouTube, but to my weekly e-magazine slash newsletter that I send out every Monday, where I just kind of do their previews or recaps of the fights as well. And it's a little bit more digestible. It's not like huge articles or anything. If it is a fight preview like the one I made for this fight, for example, it will be a little bit on the longer side because it acts like a preview for the whole card. So I'm just basically going to go over my newsletter and kind of give a prediction on the fights coming up this Saturday and invite you guys to follow me across all my platforms because I will be going live from the weigh-ins as well, and that's probably going to be either on Instagram or TikTok, or unless you guys want to hear too, let me know as well. But enough yapping about that. Let's get on with the predictions. Like I mentioned on my newsletter, even though a lot of Canelo enthusiasts and casual boxing fans would like to have you think that Benavidez and the Benavidez family continue to make their name off of Canelo's freckled back, it just doesn't work that way, and it's not the case at all. David Benavidez actually had already became 168 champion in 2017, becoming the first, actually the youngest world champion at 168 ever at 20 years old. So he actually was already a champion at 2017 while Canelo was, still at 160 and then delving into 175. And even though, Benavidez is a two-time champ, I believe, at 168, that's not because he necessarily has any losses on his record, but he lost a lot of credibility with the fans because of, losing his belts outside of the ring, one being recreational substances and the other being the scale, right? And with a history of both being, a chubby kid, um, he also attributed that, recreational substance use to having, made his first big payday, knowing he had to get back on the grind maybe a couple weeks later, and wanting to have one good night with his friends where peer pressure is there, or just feeling like you gotta celebrate and go all out before you go back to camp. And looking back at maybe thinking someone at 20 years old, that kind of does make a lot of sense, though I'm not excusing him losing the belt. The rules are the rules. The second time I think hurt the most to the scale because it still kind of gave David this, reputation of not being disciplined enough or not being deserving enough for a Canelo payday, especially at the time where all the contenders were still, legit contenders for Canelo. But, Benavides, who was first known as El Bandera Roja, really shed off all of that negativity he gained from, losing the title twice by just facing solid opposition and beating them up, literally starting over, right? He would go back down as, a contender to fight title eliminators. And he kind of has been stuck in this title elimination at 168 for so long with Canelo holding the belt and no real urgency from the champ to defend against him specifically. He decided to move up to 175 in search of that belt, which is right now tied with between Beterbiev and Bivol, rematch on February 22nd. And that being the ultimate goal, but still wanting like a money fight, a big money fight, why not fight David Morrell, right? Who, even though is fresh and green in the pros, he's a huge amateur from former Olympian and has passed every eye test, even though he only holds 11 fights. Now let's quickly discuss David Morrell as well, because like I mentioned, he's, it's not like Shakur versus Kid Austin, which a lot of people are criticizing Shakur for because this guy's green. But David Morrell is a decorated amateur, right? He has a Cuban style, but he also has a pop. He doesn't fight like, let's say, like a Rigondo, right? Like he doesn't fight like that. He doesn't fight like Rigo. He doesn't fight like Eddie Slendara at the beginning of his career. Like, he's very much very still offensive and explosive, and that's what catches a lot of people's interest, because yes, you can see that footwork there. He has a beautiful way to like kind of set up some punches with his footwork that looks really nice, but I think um what's going to hurt him in this fight, and I'll get in a little bit later into the prediction, but it's just regardless of that amateur background and Benavidez maybe not having that long amateur career, is that the pros is still different. And this is something that I've gathered from boxers and interviewing boxers of all, stages in their career, from some guys that are just turning pros, right, that are adjusting to the pros from amateurs, to champions who say it's not the same. Yes, kind of like they bring up Sean Porter beat Usyk in the amateurs. Like, it doesn't. These things would not happen in the pros, right? Or maybe. But what I'm saying is that David Morell, not only with his like knockouts, because he does have, which I think he only has like two decisions, one being his last opponent on August 3rd, the first Turkey LSG card here in LA. I was there and I seen both these guys live, and I've seen David Benavidez spar multiple opponents, including people, multiple people. I mean, including people. So I do want to say that Morell is a dangerous fight. Like, this is a southpaw as well. A guy who has a style that can definitely prove very problematic for Benavidez, who, like David Morell said, does fight like RoboCop. He does. Like, this is something that I remember myself saying back when he beat dog. What was his name? Back when he regained his title at 168. The dog, I forgot what his last name is. That fight I was there for, and I remember being like, yeah, he fights like he literally just moves forward. But the thing is that he does it, and even if you're landing some punches on him, he doesn't care. Like, Benavidez still comes forward, and it's been working for him. So, yes, I feel like David Morell is going to make it a couple rounds very difficult for Benavidez, but I just feel like, even though he's been passing every eye test, he closed off Showtime's last boxing event in December 2023, I believe. Like, this kid is still very fresh for the pros. I really am picking Benavidez just because I think Morell is underestimating the pros. The fact that, yes, he may have this amazing Cuban style, but Benavidez has literally sparred everybody and their mamas here in LA, right? In Big Bear. He continues to move from, he's been in Arizona, in LA, San Diego, Seattle, Phoenix, Miami now, right? Just getting all sorts of different sparring. I personally witnessed him sparring Bivol a couple times, which he definitely held his own in there, and he definitely had some moves on him, right? It was just sparring, but it was a great thing to see, and it was definitely competitive, right? He talked the same thing on the Andre Ward podcast, that he sparred Pavlik, right? He sparred Triple G for the longest, right? He almost sparred Canelo before when Triple G was fighting um, Jacobs, he was sparring Benavidez, and he was about to go spar with Canelo. And Benavidez said that after he found out that Triple G was sparring with him, he chose to not spar with Benavidez, because I guess he felt that he would go back and tell Triple G his secrets or whatever, they're sparring, and how would that go. So that was the reasoning behind Canelo choosing to not spar Benavidez after initially agreeing to, according to Benavidez. Even though, yes, like, Morrell has been, participating in Olympic Games that have all sorts of people from all over the world competing, the amateur style is very different. And I think Benavidez being in there, like, seriously sparring with professionals since like a young age, like being thrown into that immediately, I think that basically sets you up for anything that, in any style that a lot of people may bring. And maybe if this fight would have happened at 168, then maybe I would have favored um, Morell, just because I feel that Benavidez would be slower at 168, that now that he can be heavier and still move around. So that's my take on that. In my interview with Benavidez, where, we talked about, both of them going the distance in their last card, because I think they also both got a little bit of hate on going the distance, in the way that, um, they were not supposed to, according to the fans, right? Morell was supposed to, impress with the knockout, and then Benavidez was supposed to also put away this former long reigning WBC light heavyweight champ, right? Former champ. So neither of them put their opponents away. And when I brought it up, Benavidez said that, their fights were different in the way that he had gone against someone, again, a durable opponent whose only loss came to a battering by Berta, which up until like the mid rounds, it was pretty even their fight. It was a really great unification fight. So yes, he was, coming off a long layoff, but I mean, Volstek has been one of my favorite fighters since, again, the Olympics. So I really do respect them as an opponent. And Benavides also cited his injuries. And of course, we don't like hearing about injuries after the fight. Like, it seems like, why are you bringing that up now? But he did, um, quote that he had some hand injuries, and his stitches he had gotten stitches during sparring, and all of that kind of contributed to him not being able to give it his all against um Vosdick, and that he didn't want to pull out of the fight because it was such a mega event with Tank on the, as co-stars, right, in this big event. So I understand, but I feel like he didn't have to say all that because Volsdick is just such a good opponent anyway, still, in my opinion. And not like Morell's last opponent wasn't, or his opposition hasn't been good. It's just that it's been up to par with his development. Like, he's only 12 fights in, right? He's kind of, yes, he's knocking a lot of guys out because he's that good, and he passes every inch, is very agile, very athletic, lovely footwork, obviously some good power. But in his last fight, he was getting touched up where he's just kind of just also just standing there, like, you'd get hit and you just stand there, right? And Benavidez, like, yes, he kind of comes forward at you, but it's the volume and the speed in which he is also coming at you, the pressure in which the fact that he's just coming at you, regardless of you throwing back at him, right? That I think is going to overwhelm Morell at the end of the day. The fact that, yes, he's trying, and I think he is going to have very successful first rounds, just like Plant did, just like Boo Boo Andre did, right? But I think what's crazy is that Benavides puts Benavides puts such a fucking ass beating on his opponent once he gets the rhythm, once he's able to cut off that ring, that, like, we forget that he was like losing the other rounds, right? Because yes, he is kind of just, after Caleb Plant shows. I was at Disneyland watching this fight. I was at Oogie's Cantina. What is it? The Star Wars stuff cantina, and I was just watching it on the iPad. Like, oh my god, he's just chasing after Caleb Plant. Why did he get this big ass ring? But at the same time, I'm just like, you know what? Eventually, he's gonna catch him. And I think with Morell, again, because Morell likes to bang, and even him in his interviews, he said, "Yes, I like to bang." Right? Like, so they are going to go in there and try to hit each other eventually. And I think, regardless of whether Morell wants to play it safe and box more on the outside and use his footwork, just like with Caleb Plant and Boo Boo, I think eventually David's going to catch him. And if he trades with Benavidez and decides to go, toe to toe, even worse. I think Benavidez at 175 is going to be stronger than him currently at 175, especially because of the experience. So that's just my take. I think Benavidez, once he finds his rhythm, he's going to Robocop his ass into a corner, and it's going to be a stoppage. I think it's going to be a stoppage because of the overwhelming, um, pressure that Benavidez does. Like, that's just his trademark thing. And yes, a lot of people say that he has no footwork and flat footed and doesn't move his head, but so far nobody has been able to keep him down. Because yes, another thing people quote is that he's been down before, he's been hurt before. But it's kind of like when Canelo got hurt against Cotto's brother, right? It's kind of like, yeah, but they came back and won the fight type stuff, right? So I don't really, fighters are gonna get knocked down. I've been a freaking boxing fan long enough to like know that being knocked down is not that deep if you come back and win the fight, right? So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. And let me just go quickly into the undercard, over the undercard as well, and give you guys my thoughts on those as well. Yes, so the reason I'm super excited to cover this card is because the undercard's super freaking amazing. Like, they're all really good fights, right? So in the co-main we have Fulton versus Figueroa 2. I guess it's now Figueroa versus Fulton 2. And this is a great freaking fight. This is 50-50 because their first fight was 50-50, and, Fulton won by majority decision. So, yes, he won, but it could have basically gone either way. And I know a lot of people criticize Fulton because he didn't look great as prelim gang, right, in the Canelo undercard, I believe. He got put down and he won, but it was not that great of a performance. So I know a lot of people like see that, feel like he's just old news now, but his resume is actually really solid, and his only loss comes to Naoya Inoue, right? And he had been, inactive since then. So I was a little bit more forgiving just because inactivity is really um can really hurt a fighter, right? The thing is that, the momentum, he kind of seems to have like a chip on his shoulder. It's kind of been a little, like with, a little sassy, little attitude going on because he feels like the fans are disrespecting him. And, maybe so did PBC when they put him in the undercard in the prelims, right? As a former champ with only one loss to another champ. But now, here comes Figueroa. He, has looked great since their loss. Knocked Nettie out with a body shot, right? Knocked Jesse Magdaleno out with a body shot. So I think he just has this really good momentum coming into this fight as opposed to Fulton, who kind of seems more like, like standoffish of the whole scene just because how they treated him, right? And rightfully so, he feels that way. But I just feel like I favor Figueroa just because his momentum, and he's just a pressure fighter too, and Fulton just looked not that great, right, in this last fight. So I think he can still just maybe outbox Figueroa, right? But I just think Figueroa's momentum and his volume and his pressure is going to be the deciding factor. Now Pitbull is back, and Pitbull's back against Angel Fierro, but he also has a fight lined up already against Ryan Garcia, supposedly, right? It would in the undercard of Haney versus Ramirez, or vice versa in the Turkey Al Sheik card. That's, I don't like when fighters do that. Like, they'll have a fight lined up even though they're already fighting. But yeah, he's coming back against this guy after losing to Valenzuela, right? Rayo Valenzuela. Again, a lot of people felt that was controversial. I didn't. I did feel like he was just wasting a lot of time trying to cut off the ring for Venezuela, and Venezuela was not letting him, right? I think he pulled off his fight perfectly, and he was able to land the better punches. So I think he did lose his last fight, Isaac Cruz, but he has a chance to come back with his usual aggressive, mini Mike Tyson, right? Come back and get a good knockout right before he fights Ryan Garcia. I just feel like he will get this fight going unless he's really just shot off, the last defeat. But I don't think he works like that. He had losses too. He lost to Tank, and that only, kind of made him a bigger star. So I think he's still on his way to, if he has a fight with Ryan Garcia, he just has to get by Fierro, and I don't think that's going to be a problem too much. Now, Jesus Ramos, Raimono Ramos, a lot of people feel like he got robbed against Eric Lubin. He's coming back against Banana Jason Rosario. And if you remember Banana, he's the guy that upsets Hurd, I believe. And then he just had he was champ for a bit, but then he got knocked out by Charlo to the body, and then he just kept getting shot to the body and like looking very, very soft in the belly every time somebody lands there. So I think Jesus Ramos is also going to be utilizing his kind of youth against someone who's already a seasoned vet, who, even though came back on Pro Box, it was a draw, I think, against Hurt, and neither of them did anything that was like, oh my god, can't wait to see these guys back, right? So I think Ramos is a good name for him, a former champ, someone that he can also, hurt to the body and look good. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And I know they added Khmer Moulton on the Moulton, what's his name? I know they added him on the card, and he's just a really freaking amazing prospect to watch. We know he has the backing of Floyd Mayweather, right? He's a very exciting kid. So he's also going to be on the card. Jose Benavidez Jr., who I also have an interview with, is going to be on the card. So this is a great freaking card. The prelims are going to start at 3, I believe, and then at 6, the main card, or 5. I put it in the newsletter at 3 and 5. Yes, Pacific time. So all this is in the newsletter, as well as a preview for the fight, and you can just subscribe with the link on the description. and subscribe to the channel as well. If you made it this far, you might as well. And then let me know if you would want anything specific covered. I get there on Friday, and I will be there for the fight and streaming the live press conference as well. So let me know what you think in the comments. Who do you have? And I'll see you guys there in Vegas, or follow me across social medias and you see me there. See you guys, right? Bye.